G'day, and welcome to Derriere Farms, a brand new YouTube channel dedicated to the Farming Simulator franchise, and specifically right now, Farming Simulator 22, as it is the most current release of the game. We're going to explore all aspects of Farming Simulator 22 so that you can learn how to maximize your productivity in the game, grow your farm, and make the most profit. If these sound like topics that you would be interested in, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a video. Now, I first decided to start the channel when the other YouTubers got their preview copies of the game and started releasing their first videos. I'd had a feeling Farming Simulator 22 was going to be different than previous versions of the game, just on the tidbits of information that Giants had leaked prior to the game's release. But it didn't become abundantly clear as to how different the game was going to be until the other YouTubers got their copies and started, as I said, releasing their videos. Sure, previous versions of the game had mods that added things like seasons and production chains, but these were now going to be base game features in Farming Simulator 22, and that really got me excited. I'd played all the Farming Simulator franchises or releases from the initial release of the game right up to Farming Simulator 19, and fundamentally, with the exception of a few mods, the way you played the game was the same. You got up. I always had my crop growth on first so that I would have a predictable cycle. So you got up, you planted your fields, you did whatever you had to do with your animals if your farm was big enough to have animals. You fertilized. You waited. You went to bed. You got up the next morning. Your crops were ready for harvest. You harvested. You cultivated or direct drilled. Fertilized / limed. Rinse and repeat. And you grew your farm that way. While I dabbled in seasons in Farming Simulator 19, I didn't actually play with it on a regular basis because I found it overly complicated the game in some ways, and often caused crashes, at least for me, as it was a mod, and often conflicted with other mods. The same thing with production chains. I installed Global Company, and some aspects of it were very enjoyable, and some aspects were overly complicated. So essentially, I played the game the same way as I'd always played. Well, then I started to see more and more information, like I said, from other YouTubers about seasons and production chains in Farming Simulator 22. Sure, you didn't have to buy a production chain if you didn't want to. And sure, you could turn seasons off if you wanted to. crops still took X number of days to grow, even with seasons turned off. It was no longer a one-day turnaround time. You had to wait anywhere from 6 months to almost a year to have your crops, 6 months, so 6 days to 12 days to have your crops grow and be ready to harvest, depending on what type of crop it was. Then they started to look at animals. And I realized that animals were also treated differently in the game. Cows, pigs, and sheep, for example, could now be purchased at 3 different ages. Newborn, immature, and mature animals. Barns were a lot more expensive, and they no longer held 10 days worth of food. Okay, so that's different. There was also the introduction of beef versus dairy cows, which we hadn't had in previous games. So I was curious about that. So, like I said, at that point, I came to the realization that I would have to figure out all these new features in the game, and my playstyle would have to be different than it had been in the previous versions of Farming Simulator. Since I was going to be learning, that was when I decided I would start a YouTube channel, like I said, to share the information with you guys. Just lining up here. Let's take this field of canola that we are planting now. I mean, canola had always been a fairly profitable crop. In the previous games, you planted the field, you waited a day or day and a half, depending on how fast your crop growth was. You harvested it, and you got your crop. You put it in the silo, and you waited for the price to go up. Well, now, like I said, all of a sudden, canola is one of the longest crops to grow. You can plant in August or September like we're doing, and then you have to wait almost a full year till July and August. Well, that's really going to change the way I farmed, or my farming style. So even with seasonal cycles off, I would have to wait 11 days. If you count it up, before I could harvest my canola. So I couldn't rely on canola as a moneymaker. Well, my main moneymaker anymore. Soybeans wasn't so bad. That was one of my other money makers. Now you only had to wait. Well, let's say you planted here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You only had to wait 7 days. Or 6 days if you don't count your planting day. So, like I said, that was when I really realized that Farming Simulator 22 was fundamentally different than the rest of the franchise. And was going to take a whole new way of doing things. So like I said, that was when I decided to start the channel so that I could help other farmers out there learn as I went. Secondly, Farming Simulator 22 really appealed to me because it was a lot more realistic now. I'd been a dairy farmer in real life I was a second generation dairy farmer, right up until about 10, 15 years ago or so, when NAFTA and the quota system and all affected farm prices and the amount of money you could make. And my brothers didn't want to go into farming. My parents were getting old, and they decided to sell the farm. So I went into Farming Simulator, along with a new career. And then when I got my hands on a copy of the game, I truly started to dig into what was different and how I could make money and minimize my expenses with all these changes. And at that point, my mind was made up. I was also going to try and share my experiences and what I learned with you guys. Now I do try to make daily videos exploring everything from operating costs to how to raise cattle to what's the best piece of equipment to use. It's not always possible depending on my schedule, but I do try. And as far as the depth and complexity of Farming Simulator 22 goes, it's got me hooked. I went back and tried to play Farming Simulator 19, and it just didn't have the depth that this game has. So like I said, hopefully you'll subscribe to the channel, and hopefully you will find what I have to teach you useful, and you can use it to help build your own farm and maximize your profits. Take care, and thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next video.